So, Deborah, it's fair to say that Shell Dockley was one of the most complex characters of the show. So, did you enjoy playing that role, or was it difficult at times?
I really enjoyed playing that role, despite the fact that it was incredibly challenging at times. I think it was always challenging, actually, because comedy is always challenging, and there was certainly a comedy aspect, a comical aspect to Shell. But moreover, the tragic circumstances of her life, were quite difficult to portray in a sense because it just, I think it was all kind of horrible stuff really that she was either
Yeah.
having to do or talk about, and for me I think that was a bit of a challenge. It wasn't just sort of saying lines, it was very emotional.
And I mean, because like we've seen scenes, for instance, where Shell had her baby taken off her. She was abused by Jim Fenner. We realised that actually in her childhood she went through a hell of a lot. So again, as an actress playing those scenes, that must also take it out of you as well, because you're kind of putting yourself in that situation.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the scene that you referred to with the baby being taken away was the worst scene I've ever had to play because I was actually pregnant at the time. And when I say pregnant, I must have been about, I think it was literally 2 weeks before I gave birth that I did that scene. So we had a midwife on hand, and I had originally said to the producers, they were very naughty actually, because I'd originally said to my agent, who assured me that she had had this conversation with the producers. I said, whatever they do, please don't let them write me a birth scene in it. I don't mind if my character's pregnant, but I don't want to pretend to give birth so close to actually giving birth because I think it's dangerous.
Yeah.
And then we got the scripts just a few weeks before, and there it was that Shell was giving birth, and I just knew it was going to be really difficult for them to change everything at last minute, and I just thought, oh, for God's sake. So I went ahead with it, but we had an actual midwife standing by, just in case it did
Yeah.
bring my labour on, but I was absolutely determined I was going to do the worst acting of my life and just make sure that I didn't act with my body, that I did act only in my head. All the things that they tell you at drama school, I tried to do the opposite, just so that I didn't actually, physically end up believing that I was giving birth and that setting my labour off. So that, just things like that, and the cells were a challenge. But when the actual acting came and they took the baby away, I had already been holding these two little babies who were baby boys, and I knew I was having a baby boy in real life. And of course, all my hormones were just, they were all psyched up, ready for having a little baby. And you've got to suspend your imagination. You've got to, at least in part, believe that in that very moment that that's what's happening to you. And it was all too much. I think it was years really before I could kind of talk about it without welling up, which is ridiculous because obviously it's not real, but there's a lot of investment goes into a character like that, I
Of
think.
course.
So yeah, it was really, really tough. I mean, the other thing I think that was definitely the toughest series for me was series 5, and trying to work when you're that pregnant is kind of crazy, really. You should be just putting your feet up. And I remember getting fitted for a costume, and it was the costume with the, shall we say, appendage, um, just to make it sound a bit nicer than it really was. And if you know what I'm talking about, Bad
Yeah.
Girls fans will probably know what I'm talking about, is where I get stuck in the kissing gate, being chased out of the nightclub in Amsterdam by Jim Fenner, etc. It was a kind of reverse Benny Hill, really, with all the prison officers chasing after me. And of course, I had this ridiculous, I can only call it appendage, which was huge and made of papier-mâché. But when I was getting the costume fitting for that, and all the PVC and everything, the thigh boots that went with it, and at 6 months pregnant at that stage, and I was crying. I was literally
Oh.
crying down the phone I didn't even tell my mum. I was crying down the phone to a friend's mum and saying, I wasn't this, I'm in this horrible outfit. I just want to wear a nice more rationally dressed. So yeah, so that was kind of tough. I had a
Oh.
complete sense of humour failure. I mean, it is. supposed to be funny. But I think I always found that challenging about the role as well. The fact that it was an issues drama. To start with, it felt very much that it was an issues drama. We were all taken off to Winchester Prison to have a look round and to interview inmates and to understand what it's like to be there, what it's like to be in that situation, what it's like to, be at the kind of rock bottom, and all the implications of being in jail. The way that your family and your life go on without you, and you're still, very frustratingly not being able to sort of contact them as much as you can, certainly not be able to do anything for them, just circumstances out of your control, just the control out of your life just completely going, so all these different things and all the issues that we covered as well, it was really, really heavy stuff. And then it got more and more sort of silly and pantomimic, and I think that isn't necessarily a criticism, but it had to go somewhere, and I think that they were very, very clever, those writers and producers, at giving pathos, giving the show pathos, but also the comedy as well, and that for me was the biggest challenge of the show. Was to know whether you were gauging that right, whether you were giving enough, funny stuff, and enough, emotion and truth. I think, the key with that is to always try and play everything for truth, not play everything for laughs, but play it in earnest. And if it's, if the writing's there, it will work. And obviously you're always worried, thinking, but is it working? Is it going to, is this going to be okay? It's very difficult to see it objectively. And I think, we had our critics and we had people who didn't, think that it wasn't their cup of tea or what have you. But then it seemed to pull at the heartstrings of so many. But at the same time, it was entertaining. So it was a great show to be involved in. I'd go back in a heartbeat if they ever did it again. I think I really see it now for what it was worth. I really value it now.
Well, I mean, that was going to be one of my other questions. Would you go back? So it's good to hear that you've obviously got fond memories and you would go back if they did make a remake.
Yes, I would. It is a fond memory, and I'm very grateful for that part. I just don't think that there's ever been a part like that for me since, before or since, really. I mean, I've had some good parts and I've had some wonderful jobs, and I really enjoy doing impressions. And my career has really taken that path now to doing more comedy impressions, which I do love. But there was something very special about playing Shell Dockley.
Well, I mean, obviously acting is something that you're great at, but impressions is as well. And actually, I remember the scene with Mad Tessa Spall when you actually did some impressions. You did Cilla Black, and it was great that they incorporated that into the show.
Yeah, I know. Even I was surprised at that. I think they've just sort of, been on the Google and researched the Google, as in Google, not the drink. Though it was a while ago. Was it before Google? No, I don't think so. But they had found out that I'd done these impressions and everything. Or maybe one of the writers even remembered from Opportunity Knocks way back in the day when I was on that as a kid. And they sort of wrote that in, and it was a little bit close to the bone in a way. I thought, hang on a minute, I don't like for my characters to be, to become too much like myself in my own real life. And I thought, doing these as a kid, doing impressions as a kid in talent competitions, that's kind of like me. But they managed to put it in such a way that was so her, that was so Shell, poor Shell. It was so tragic and it was so awful, and that it did kind of work. I think in a weird way. I thought, whoa, they've got me tap dancing. And, I mean, there was a time they had me doing all sorts. The breakdowns, the mental breakdowns, I think, were the kind of the biggest storylines for Shell. They were the most impactful on me, and possibly on audiences too. When she loses it, and there was one particular time when my character had lost the plot, and I was having to sort of roll around all day on the floor, just being, mad, having had a sort of complete breakdown, and I was rolling around on the floor in these really horrible sort of jogging bottoms and sweatshirt, and I thought, oh, my hair all a mess and no makeup, and it was bad enough, but there was this really awful smell, and it was such a horrible place that we used to film in. It was, it was really kind of method, because although we did do some scenes in Oxford jail, even the internal scenes were all in this really awful sort of like a warehouse aircraft hangar type building with a jail in it, a set in it that was like a jail, but it was right by the canal, this really grotty area of London, and there were lots of rats and things like that around. And anyway, I was rolling around thinking, this is an awful smell, awful. I kept saying, even I smell of it now, it's just absolutely disgusting. And then one of the Sparks piped up. He said, I know what that smell is. He said, there was an old tomcat in here earlier. We had to throw it out. And it had sprayed everywhere. So I was rolling around in cat wee. So yeah, it wasn't the most glamorous job. Turning up at the TV Quick Awards or the National Television Awards, it all looks very glamorous, doesn't it? And those occasions are quite glamorous, but that is it. The rest of the time, it's not glamorous at all. And, and it wasn't actually, they didn't have a huge budget for it. We were all well paid. But, in terms of the luxuries that you might expect on a film set, we didn't have those. We had these little porter cabins to get changed in, and they were cold, and, with these sort of portable gas heaters, and there was nowhere to go and sleep. And I was one of the lucky ones, not because I had a star dressing room, but because I had my own cell, so I could go and have a kip in my little bunk and it wasn't being used.
Now, you probably know this as well, but Shell versus Fenner is one of the most gripping feuds in the show's history. Jim almost thought that he had Shell wrapped around her finger, but actually Shell kind of got the better of him when she tried to kill him, which led to one of the biggest cliffhangers in Series 2. Now, what were your thoughts on that storyline? Because it was talked about, and it was absolutely huge, and it was a different kind of thing that we've seen with Shell, because Shell normally was quite vulnerable almost, and she would do anything that Jim said, and this was the first that we'd seen that actually she kind of said, do you know what, I'm not having this, I'm standing up to him.
Yeah, I think it was really empowering, actually. Empowering for women and for girls. I always sort of feel uncomfortable when girls or women say to me, I used to watch when I was really young and Shell was my hero, and I think, oh no, she was an awful person. Don't ever aspire to be like her. She was a bully, she was foul, she was, there was so much wrong. The way she treated other women was appalling, but I think that's probably what the appeal was the way that she got one up on Fenner. She decided she's not going to stand for this. She is going to get her own back, and it was really empowering. I think the way that she did it was obviously, not exemplary. I wouldn't recommend people go stabbing bottles into stomachs. As a rule, and I have to say, it felt shocking to do. And when we read the scripts, reading the scripts was probably the most exciting thing, because you're thinking, what's going to happen next? What's going to happen? What am I going to get to do? And what's going to happen to Shell? You become so, as I said before, invested in it. I remember seeing that and just being absolutely horrified, thinking, oh my God, really? How's that going to work? And, and having the sugar glass bottle, because it's not real glass, it's still sharp, but it's not as dangerous as glass, but the sugar glass bottle, and the fake blood, and just having to be that psychopathic. It was enormous fun, but I did feel some sense of social responsibility. I thought, oh my God, I kind of sensed that people might be on Shell's side because Jim was so repugnant. And also, that's how I felt. I certainly had an empathy for Shell, which I hoped, viewers might sort of relate to, but yeah, I did feel the sense of social responsibility. Oh my God, please don't anybody get any ideas from this.
That wouldn't be good.
A really bad influence, I know.
You just kind of mentioned then that, Shell could be a bully, she could be horrible, and there was times I think viewers absolutely hated Shell, but again, we loved her at the same time. And when you decided to leave the show, I thought it was, as a fan watching it, I thought it was a huge blow for the show. So what made you kind of at that point kind of step back and think, right, this is time for me to leave now? Because obviously you did return in Series 5, but there was a series where you decided to leave beforehand.
There was. I think I felt my biological clock ticking. I got married just that year before or something, around that time anyway, and I knew that I wanted to start a family quite soon, and I sort of thought, well, this is my last chance to do anything else, and I thought, I don't want to be a one-trick pony, as it were. I don't want to have just done this and that's it. And also I thought, I'm not sure that this would be a good job to do, with a child, with a family. It was right at the opposite end of London. It was very long hours, and it was extremely, well, how do you put it? Not exactly traumatic, but it was demanding. It was a really demanding role. So I just wanted to give myself space. Before I knew I was going to settle down to a sort of family life, I wanted to give myself space and a chance to do some other jobs, to play some other parts, and to see how far I could go in my career, really. So it was very much a personal choice for personal reasons. It was not that I had anything against the show or the people in the show or anything. I mean, I loved it. I loved my time there. I enjoyed working with the rest of the cast, and and the people that I worked for, I really liked as well. I just felt like I needed to sort of spread my wings and try other things. I think I just sort of thought, once I had kids, I wouldn't be doing too much more. But of course, you still got to earn money, So I have ended up working since then. And in some ways, I think, I just should have carried on. I should have just stayed there. But there's no point in looking back, is there? But I think that's why I always think, but if I had the chance again to play that role, I would definitely do it.
I mean, I spoke to you before off air about me being a huge fan of impressions. I really am. I find it fascinating. I've watched lots of your work, especially when you've done like Davina McCall and you did Pat Butcher and so many other different
Thank
things.
You so much. Brilliant. I'm so glad you remember that. Brilliant. But please do not swear.
It's so. I honestly, I find it fascinating because I find myself just looking at listening to what people say and trying to mimic them. So is that what you do in regards to being able to do impressions? When did you realise you could actually do them as well?
Well, I don't so much do it with people I know. I mean, sometimes something leaps out at me, but I don't sort of study people's voices and then try to do them. I do sometimes listen to the way people speak instead of listening to what they're saying. I'm very distracted by people's the sorts of characters that they are, and what they do, what their gestures are, etc. I'm sort of distracted by that and not necessarily on the ball at what they've said if they're giving me instructions. That can be a bit of a problem. But I started doing them because it was just always a fun thing to do in our family, in our household. My dad used to, it was the time of Mike Yarwood, and my dad used to do a lot of those kind of impressions, like Steptoe and Son and Garnet and those kind of, those old sitcom impressions, Frank Spencer, and then there were the politicians as well of the time, Dennis Healy, and so he said, maybe you can do Margaret Thatcher. And obviously before that, he used to entertain me with Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck and all these cartoons. But I remember him saying, well, I could do Dennis Healy, maybe you can do Margaret Thatcher. And I was about 6. And so so I practiced this little impression, which went something like this: when I become Prime Minister, because I was about 6. Now that my voice is a bit more mature, I can now say, when I become Prime Minister, which is a little bit more like her. I'd like to think it's improved slightly over the years. And of course, we have another First Lady PM. So, yes, what we need is a strong and stable economy and a clear direction for Brexit. That sort of thing.
I mean, you can do impressions. I mean, I've watched loads of your stuff, and some of them, I just think, how can you do, like Anne Widdecombe? Your Anne Widdecombe is amazing.
Anne Widdecombe, it's really funny. It's not one that I've ever done before, really. But I started off doing Sandy Toksvig completely by accident. I should say completely by accident. I was standing up one day and I was chopping vegetables in the kitchen to make some dinner, as you do, unless you're on Bake Off, and then you won't be chopping vegetables, you'll be adding currants and things like that. But anyway, that's what I was doing, and I was chopping cucumber, and suddenly I was having a conversation, and then I made this noise, and I thought, oh, that sounded like someone. I kept doing it. Where's that? What is that? What's that noise? That's somebody. And then I thought, what if I just carry on talking with this kind of noise going on? So I went, and then I started speaking like that, and I suddenly thought, I've got it. I'm Sandy Toxic. And so when somebody asked me to do Anne Widdecombe, I sort of thought, oh, that's a bit similar to Sandy Toksvig, because the only thing that you need to do is you need to put the voice right up there. Yes, of course, right up there, just like that. Yes, and then obviously all you have to do then is be extremely posh and a little bit judgmental.
That is fantastic. I'm so jealous of your impressions. I really am.
They're very silly, aren't they? It's a really silly way to make a living.
The best thing was when you were on Lorraine and you actually did an impression of Lorraine.
No, but she's so nice. No, she is though. She's very, very nice. Now you can bet Lorraine. No, she's so nice. I don't mind a bit, as long as you can do me properly. She says, she once said that to me. She says, as long as it's good, I don't mind. That's what she said. So I don't want to do this in front of you. Do you mind? No, it's fine. It's fine as long as it's good. So no pressure then.
So obviously, I mean, we've just spoke a lot about obviously your time in Bad Girls. I know you had an amazing time in Coronation Street as well, one of the biggest TV programs in the UK. But have you got any upcoming projects that you can tell us about? Something that you're working on at the moment?
Well, staying with the impressions, it's something called The Imitation Game. It's for ITV, and we filmed it already. It's a panel show, but for impressionists. So a bit kind of 8 out of 10 cats, that sort of, that kind of panel show. Yeah. I got used to that kind of thing, but a bit more of a flavour of what's the old one with charades. Well, I'll tell you what it's a bit like, I suppose, if I'm kind of trying to compare it and describe it, is if anyone's watched, sorry, I haven't a clue on Radio 4, listened to that, it's a little bit in that kind of vein. But basically, it's just like a parlour game where we all do impressions and we all have an absolute scream. I'm a team captain. Rory Bremner is the other team captain, and he's absolutely fantastic. Alexander Armstrong is the host and the quizmaster. And then we have guests on every week, and we've got some fantastic people who have come on the show. Jan Ravens, John Coleshaw, Lewis McLeod, some of the Dead Ringers team there, as well as Ronnie Ancona and Alistair McGowan, who people will remember from their show, and just as fabulous as ever, and lots of others. So it's really, really fun, and we all had such a good time and such a laugh that I think that, hopefully that will come across and people will enjoy it at home as much as we did in the studio.
I mean, I honestly think that's something that's missing on British TV at the moment. We have a lot of dancing shows, a lot of singing shows, but good old-fashioned variety, and you can't get more variety than impressions. I'm really looking forward to that, and that's later this year, did you say?
That's going to be in the autumn, yeah. It's already in the can. It's going to be in the autumn, ITV1, and I think it's going to be on, it's possibly at least, going to be on kind of Saturday night a little bit later after the X Factor, that sort of thing. I think that might be the slot. I'm not certain. Yeah. Don't hold me to it, because it might not be. It might be something else. It might be a Wednesday night at 9 o'clock, or it might be a Monday night at 7 o'clock, or they might just stick it in daytime. Who knows?
I think it's going to do very well.
But the kind of thing I think it is, it's probably just post Watershed. I don't think they could put it on too early, and I think it feels like Saturday night entertainment. So have a look out for it in the schedule in the autumn and see where they've put it then.
And I mean, hopefully we'll get to see you in Cheltenham at some point, because I know you do your 100 Voices show, and it'd be great to get that down here in the future, because that looks absolutely incredible.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I do really love doing that show, actually, more than anything. I really, really enjoy live work, and there's nothing better, really, I think, than having that rapport with the audience. You're all there, and it does feel like a big party, because, I'm not I don't feel like I'm doing it in front of an audience exactly. It's more, well, I am in front of an audience, but we're all together, you know?
Yeah.
You know, it feels very much like we're all having a good time together, which is really nice. I do around 100 impressions, at least 100 impressions, 50 approximately singing to comedy. I've got a live band, fabulous musicians, 6 of them. So I go through the decades, cover film and television and pop music, as I say, through the decades. So there's a bit of nostalgia in there, but obviously with all the kind of modern impressions that you'd expect to find that I might have done on Newsoids or the Impression Show or Dead Ringers. So yeah, it's good fun, really fun.
Well, if you ever fancy...
Hopefully I can bring it to your area. If you can think of a good venue for me, I'll see if I can bring it along.
Well, if you ever fancy making it 102 voices, I can do Gary Barlow and Louis Walsh for you, so let me know and I can go on stage and do those.
I think I'll have to audition you first. give me a best Louis Walsh. In fact, yeah, give me that now.
What, Gary Barlow or Louis Walsh?
Well, I think we could start with Louis. Yeah, Louis. Oh, what have you got to say? Oh, Miss Sharon's gone right off, hasn't it? I think I'll have to change it to Sharon Cole. I think I need to polish up on Miss Sharon. You know, mind you, there's a few people polished up on Sharon. I like to say that on the radio. I don't really know what it means, probably. Come on then. So what do you reckon, Louis?
Deborah, you stole the show. You got energy. I liked it. You owned it. That's my best Louis.
Very good. Very good. And Gary?
Honestly, tonight, Deborah, the way you performed that song was absolutely amazing. Oh my God.
Oh, well, I tell you, it's the yes from me.
Well, honestly, Deborah, it's been amazing having you. You're so entertaining, and watching all of your work, not only just Bad Girls, but your impressions. You're so talented in the different things that you can do, and I really appreciate the time you've given us today.
Oh, you're very kind. Not at all. Anytime. Thank you so much.
Thank you.